So welcome everybody to History's Calling, Where Will It Take You? We're actually really excited today because we are talking with a current student who has this amazing portfolio, and she's going to talk a little bit today about how she ended up doing an internship with Family Search. The reason why History's Calling exists is so that we can show the different ways and the different paths that our students take as they are learning and having experiential learning to prepare them for their futures. So Hailey, we're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and excited to share the experiences that I've had with the hopes of helping someone else to have similar experiences.
Fantastic. Well, Hailey, maybe the very first thing that we could cover in our webinar is tell us a little bit about yourself and how you arrived to where you are today.
That's a good question, and it's a long story, so if you have questions throughout, please interrupt me. Feel free to jump in with anything that you have. But I would say my family history journey really got started from a pretty young age. In Young Women's, we would have activities that we would do to learn more about our family history and things like that, but that was the extent of my experience with it. When I got to BYU, I saw that there was a family history class that could be taken for religion credit and thought that that sounded like a great opportunity. So I took that in 2018, so a while ago now, and just loved it. I had a wonderful experience, but didn't think much else of it. Skip forward a couple of years, now we're at winter semester 2021, and I'd been home from my mission for about a year at that point, just a little over a year, and wanted to, sounds like we're having a hard time with audio. Can you hear me a little bit better? Perfect. Yes. So I wanted to find a way to serve the people that I had taught a bit more, and found out that BYU was offering regional family history classes, and that they had one for Latin America. Now, I served in Washington, D.C., but I served Spanish speaking, so that seemed like a great opportunity. And so I decided to take the 1 credit class, and it ended up changing my life. I had loved family history already, but learning how to do it for someone else, how to offer that gift to someone else and go about it in a completely different way than I had before was really exciting and just a really moving experience. And I would say that one of the most helpful parts of that experience was just having a good mentor. Dr. Farnsworth was the one teaching the class, and he has become one of the greatest mentors and friends that I've ever had in a professor, or really in anyone else in many ways. He would encourage me so much. I got a C on my first paper in the class. I really struggled with understanding what the assignment was going for. And so I went to talk to him in his office and just asked how I could do better the next time. And somehow one thing led to another, and he ended up asking me to TA for him over the summer after that meeting, which just took me so much by surprise. I was just stunned because I thought I just got a C, but he saw potential. And so he kept encouraging me throughout that semester to consider the family history minor. The minor didn't seem like something that would fit into my plans just because I already had a minor. I was working towards a Spanish certificate as well. At this point, my major was linguistics. And so family history wasn't really on my radar. But over time, both with his encouragement and with just feeling like it was something that I wanted to pursue more, I decided to add that minor in addition to my minor that I had in teaching English as a second language. So one thing led to another, and as I kept TAing and finding more opportunities to be involved in the family history department, I was in another class with Dr. Farnsworth for fall semester, and when we were meeting in his office about an assignment, he mentioned that he had heard about an internship at Family Search in the Family History Library in Salt Lake to help out with their Latin American research specialist team. And hearing about that opportunity was just so exciting, but so daunting at the same time. I had only taken 2.5 family history classes at this point, And I didn't think that I would be qualified enough, but I decided to give it a try and see what opportunities might arise from it. So I decided to apply. I went in for an interview and I felt like the interview went terribly. I was so nervous and felt so awkward, but they must have liked me well enough because then they picked me. And so I got the chance to get started with this internship. I've been there since the end of October now, and I have until the end of this October. It's a full year. And so it was at that point that I thought, maybe this is something that I need to look into more. At this point, I was probably about halfway through my linguistics major and only had a few semesters planned ahead of me. And so I thought, well, I can't change my major now. It's too late. I've already committed to this path. And so family history will just have to be something that I do on the side. And then my supervisor at the internship, his name is Fritz. Fritz sat me down one day and just looked at me, and I thought, am I getting fired? Am I in trouble? I don't really know what he's going for here, but he just looked so serious. And then the first thing that he asked me was, how much Russian did you take? Now, I had studied Russian for a summer a couple years before during the break with COVID and everything, when I had a little bit more free time, and fell in love with the language and the culture. But I was at the family history library to be on the Latin American team. And I figured that that was the path that I was going to be taking as far as family history was concerned. Russian could just be a linguistics thing. But he encouraged me to take on the training for the Slavic team as well and start doing Russian trainings on top of the Spanish and Italian and Portuguese and French trainings that they already had planned for me. And instead of feeling scared or daunted by that challenge, I just felt excited. And he encouraged me at that point to consider changing my major to family history so that I would have more time to dedicate to taking classes about doing research specifically in both Latin America and in the Slavic countries, and to take the opportunity to study Russian for another year. That was a terrifying thought because, again, I had this plan ahead of me for so long to do linguistics. I had been sticking with it for so long. But then through a lot of pondering and prayer and studying and trying to figure out how in the world I would still graduate and working everything out, it just felt so right to jump on this path. And so I guess to kind of summarize the story and kind of give the therefore what of my story, I would just say that it's kind of the opposite of what you usually hear, that usually you find the path that you want to follow and then an internship helps to confirm that path. But for me, it was the internship that started the path. And it's this internship that's really just kickstarting this entire new adventure.
That is so phenomenal. Your story is such a big deal because I think that often, like you said, we start by thinking, having a focus in mind and then doing experiences that help us to focus even more, right? But I love what you're saying, that you didn't necessarily know, but you still used your agency and your faith to move forward in these different directions. And then things started to become more clear. And I really appreciate that insight. It sounds to me too, that along this journey, the mentorship experiences, the relationships that you developed, the people along the way aided in the choices that you made. And then not only that, but your insatiable curiosity and the ability to learn and adapt to languages quickly were skills that you brought with you. And then it just all came together in this really nice, beautiful package. But that starting point is really hard for students. And so I'm curious if you could tell us about things that helped you in your decision-making process. And I know that wasn't part of the original questions that I sent you, but that's just something that came to my mind. Like, what was it about your decision-making process that kind of helped you pivot and move through information and these different experiences that you've been given?
Ooh, that's a really great question. I have to kind of put myself back in my shoes as I was going through that decision-making process, because it was stressful. It was overwhelming to change everything that I had planned on in so many ways. I would say one of the biggest parts of that process for me, that decision-making process, was considering how I could make a difference and how I could apply the skills that I personally had to be able to make that difference. I think that we're all blessed with gifts and different abilities for a reason, that we all have something different to bring to the table. And if we focus on the strengths that we have and the work that we've already put in, we're able to see our own potential a lot more. And so being able to see how bringing linguistics to the family history table would be an opportunity not only to be a family historian, but to be a linguist and to apply everything that I've been working towards already was a big part of what helped with that decision. I would also say, I guess I would just say that I'm trying to think how to put it into words. I guess that counseling with people who could help provide some additional direction and people who I could trust was another important part of that process. My parents are on the call today, and they can probably vouch for the stress that went through that decision-making process, and also probably the stress that they felt but didn't show as much. I remember one conversation with my mom where she kind of just said, if this is what you really want to do, but like you should probably also still get certified to teach English just in case. And I'm still planning on that, following that counsel from her, because I think that she's right, that it's always good to have a backup plan, especially when you're taking the kind of leap of faith that this provided. But both she and my dad and Dr. Farnsworth all said at different points that if something feels right, then it's right and you can run with it. And ultimately, it was a spiritual journey, most of all. It was a spiritual decision-making process where it was a chance to reflect on what I could do to do good in the world. When I first got to BYU, I've been through a few different majors at this point. I had a whole plan of what I was going to do. I was going to become an editor. I was going to minor in music. It was going to be wonderful. And the second that I set foot on campus, I had the feeling that that wasn't what I was supposed to do. And around that time, I was studying in Doctrine and Covenants section 4, verse 3, where it says, we have desires to serve God, you're called to the work. And my desire ever since then has just been to find the path where I can serve others and in that way serve God, and have that direction to use my abilities to the best of my abilities to serve other people. And so keeping that in mind, that focus in mind, and counseling with others who could help point me in the right direction and play to my strengths, I would say those are the three things that help most in that decision-making process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. And I love everything that you've said, and it's so individualized and so personal, but there are some key principles to that as well that I'm really glad that you highlighted. Well, Hailey, can you maybe tell us, you gave us your story, but I want to kind of step back and do some focus questions. Were you ever concerned about the competitive nature of the internship? You know, what experiences do you feel, aside from your language maybe, that prepared you to be an intern for one of the most internationally recognized organizations doing family history work?
I love those questions. Well, first, did I worry about the competitive nature of this internship? Absolutely. I was terrified of that. I just thought of all of the people who must be more qualified than I was, especially going in with so little experience. But I would say what helped me as I was preparing for that was recognizing how much work I had been putting in. sometimes I think we go into situations like this picturing everyone's ability level as just set and finite. But work ethic is such a huge part of it, and the learning process is such a huge part of it. So even though I had only taken 2 classes in the family history department so far at that point, I had worked my tail off to do the best that I could in those classes. And I would say that it's likely that I got more out of them than most students probably would. And so because of that preparation, I was able to go into it with confidence, knowing that I had done what I could and that whatever happened would be okay. I'd say as far as approaching it as family search, this huge opportunity in the family history field, this huge beacon out of all of the different options that there are out there. I think it just took setting aside my fear and remembering that there are some things that are more important than fear. And to get your foot in the door in a company like Family Search is something that I wanted even before I considered the major. And so I'd say in preparation for that, I kind of had to take a step back and remember the other experiences I had had taking on big challenges like this. I was a musician all through high school and still love music. And as I would participate in different orchestras and solo festivals and things like that, I had opportunities where I was faced with challenges that brought a similar feeling, even if maybe they weren't quite as big of a deal. And so being able to think back on those experiences and just take what I had learned from other experiences was a huge part of what helped me to feel prepared, even though this was a different type of challenge that I was facing.
That motivation and fortitude is so important. We talk about resilience a lot in the work that we do with students and overcoming some of that fear. So thank you so much for guiding us through the process that you used as you looked at the competitive nature. I know that there's a lot of data out there that says, certain populations of students don't even try because they don't meet, 90% of the qualifications. However, what we see is that even if they meet 32 to 50% of the qualifications, they're qualified, and to just kind of go for it and see. And if the answer is no, then another opportunity possibly. So I appreciate your insight there. What value have you found in experiential learning in general? It sounds like not only just this internship, but you threw yourself into projects and coursework that allowed you to have experiences, which I think we'd really like to talk about today. What kind of value do you find in experiential learning, either in the learning process or as it qualifies you for a job?
I think that experiential learning really changes our perspective on what it means to learn. I'd say the first experience that I had that really brought that point home to me was auditing a class for the first time a few summers ago. This was actually one of my Russian courses that I took. I ended up auditing instead of taking the class for my second semester of Russian. And being able to go into it and just be there to learn and not worry about my grade, not worry about all of the assignments that I needed to take care of in the same way that I normally would, really helped me to focus on my growth as a learner. And so I feel like experiential learning kind of follows that same format, where obviously there are going to be deadlines. There are going to be things that we have to do on a certain timetable, and we want to do our best. But when we stop looking at it as this letter grade line of success, where an A is successful and an A- is failure, when we can turn that around and instead look at it as my best is success, then it changes everything. Experiential learning really helps you to start recognizing more what is your best and start putting your experiences and your work on a more appropriate scale, one that's more accurate and one that can help to guide you to becoming better than you are in so many different ways. I would recommend finding experiences like a TA position, or especially in the family history department, there are a million, well, maybe not a million, but many different jobs that are available in the Family History Center here in the JFSC, and so many other opportunities within the family history department that offer the opportunity to teach and to work alongside professors and really get to know the field in a different way than you do just from being in classes. Now, as far as taking the coursework that helps to lead in the right direction, I think that it's important to play to your strengths in that as well and look for the opportunities that align with where you're wanting to go or where you might want to go. Even just keeping the options open if you're not sure and trying something new can bring experience that will help you to know which way to go after that.
And that sounds like the way your life has gone. You were just willing to try something new. And if you talk to anybody else who's been in a profession, that's typically how professions look. We always think, oh, it looks like A to B and it's a straight linear line, when in actuality, there are all these different paths. And so I like that that's how you have done things, right? In your journey has been, I'm just going to try something new. And then as you try something new, the clarity of what you're doing moving forward becomes obvious, right? It becomes more clear. So that's awesome. Thank you. So before we have one last question for Hailey, but after that, we're hoping that you have some questions, those of you who are visiting with us today. But the last question, Hailey, that I have for you is, what recommendations do you have for students considering internships? What do you wish you would have known maybe, or what was the process like? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a really good question as well. I would say, as far as any recommendations go, one of the first ones that comes to mind is if you're thinking about going for it, just go for it. Because the most you have to lose is something that you never had in the first place, right? It's not going to take you back any steps. And so why not take the leap? And so that's the first thing that I would say, because I was pleasantly surprised, and you never know if you might be as well. As far as things that I wish I would have known go, I think one of the biggest things that I wish I would have known, and it's kind of along the same thread, the same thought, is I wish I would have realized what an internship really is and what an internship really means, especially in an organization like Family Search. I ended up needing to sit down with Fritz, my supervisor, and basically say to him, okay, what am I doing to contribute here again? Because I feel like I'm the one gaining everything from this experience. And really, that's how it felt all along the way, is that I'm learning so much and growing so much. And it doesn't feel like I'm contributing as much as I wish that I could. And yet I'm contributing exactly what I'm supposed to. And so it's this beautiful conundrum, I guess, an internship, because as much as it's a work environment and it's jumping into the field, it's also an opportunity that's designed to help us learn and have that experiential learning path. And so just having those opportunities to step back and recognize that you're a student as well as an employee have helped me to realize that I could go into this situation with a lot more confidence than I did. So I would say go into it feeling confident and ready to learn, and you're in the right mindset. You're in the right position to be an intern and prepare for the workforce, because you're not so worried about the intricacies of the job and you're focused more on what you're becoming.
I love that. I'm very drawn to your testimony of learning. I think that that is exactly what learning ought to be, right? This line upon line, precept upon precept, and allowing that to, you're a sponge, right? It's what it sounds like to me. I did actually have a follow-up question now before we ask everybody else for their questions. What does the day-to-day look like for you as an intern?
Ooh, this is one I'm excited to talk about because I love what I get to do. So 2 days a week, I'm in Salt Lake at the Family History Library. And on those days, I have the opportunity to help guests that come into the library. So far, I've been trained on Latin American family history research and Italian family history research. I'm working on Portuguese, Russian, and French next. And so it's quite the load. I've spent 2 months on each of those trainings that I've completed so far, and I'm counting on about the same amount of time for the others, maybe a little extra for Russian because that one's a little bit bigger. But I spend that time in the library helping as many guests as come in and need help with those specific areas that I've been trained in. And so that gives me the opportunity to meet new people who come in person to ask for help. And in addition to that, the other 3 days of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm working from home and I get to do online consultations with people from around the world who are also looking for that kind of help with those specific areas. And so I've met people from so many different countries and been able to help them get started and answer such a variety of different research questions. Now, obviously, that requires a lot of background information to feel prepared to do that, especially when you don't really know what to expect going into a lot of these interactions with the guests in the library or the online consultations. You only have a few minutes to prepare for each one. And so because of that, I go through a lot of training. That's where a decent amount of my time goes, is learning new things and new skills, getting familiar with different websites and different approaches to family history in these different areas of focus of mine, as well as working towards an accreditation in family history and doing online lookups for people who can't access the records that they need to from home. And so that's kind of what it looks like when I'm at home. When I'm in the library, I do kind of a mixture of those things as well, but spend as much time as I can helping the guests and also the missionaries in the family history library if they ever have questions to ask me.
Sounds to me like you've become a specialist, right? Like this is a specialist training program. It's what it is, really. That's fantastic. Well, Allison is on the line with us. She is our internship coordinator for history and family history students, and she is the one responsible for going over Q&As. So is there anybody in our webinar that has a question for Hailey that wants to type it in our Q&A?
Hi, Hailey. Let's jump on and say how much I've enjoyed listening to you speak. And obviously I love internships too, being that this is my job to help students find internships and enjoy them. So I've loved hearing your experience. While we're waiting for students to give us any questions that they might have, maybe you could just answer this question and tell them, so going into a new experience like this, do you feel like it's important for students to be able to ask questions and to really get out there and not feel like, if they don't feel like they've been prepared or something they've been willing to do, but being really have a communication open to be able to be trained, because it seems like you have been really open to be trained and to do whatever they needed you to do and not be afraid to ask questions as well. So what would you say to students about just jumping in there and asking questions?
I think that that's absolutely essential. It's something that I honestly struggled with myself, having the courage to ask questions, just because sometimes it feels to us, I think, that if we ask questions, that means that we're incompetent in some way because we don't know. But that's kind of the point of asking the question, right? Is to learn something that we didn't know before so we know it the next time. It has been very helpful to be in a very supportive environment in this internship where I'm encouraged to ask questions all the time. I have regular meetings with my mentor, Lauren, and with my supervisor, Fritz, and they are constantly asking if I have any questions, if there's anything they can do to help, if I'm feeling supported. And having that direction from them to ask questions, having that open invitation has really helped me to overcome the uncomfortableness that I felt towards asking questions before. And so now I've learned to really embrace, I guess, the opportunity to learn and grow and get feedback, even though sometimes that can be scary as well. And so I would say that that's definitely a way that I have specifically grown, and something that I would encourage everyone to do in an internship position or anything of the sort that might come along as well.
Thank you. I love that. I just love how you had confidence to go into this. And I hope all other students listening will have confidence to go into something that they are not 100% sure about, and just to go for it. Like you said, you have nothing to lose, just go for it. But once you're there, don't be afraid to ask questions. So I love that. And the training that you have gotten from that, that's just perfect and exactly what internships are for. We do have a question from Rachel Atkinson. She asks, what do you think it was that qualified you for your internship? And what tips do you have for anyone else who is applying?
Ooh, that was a fun question, because I've actually asked Fritz multiple times to explain to me why exactly they picked me, because it's hard for me to see why they would pick someone who was obviously kind of the underdog going into this situation. I would say one of the big things that definitely helped me to get this position was the letter of recommendation that Dr. Farnsworth wrote for me. He wrote me a glowing letter that really made a difference. And Fritz even said that that was part of the turning point in the hiring process for choosing me for this internship, was reading that letter and seeing that someone else had seen the abilities that I was bringing to the table, even though I might not have had as much experience as another candidate may have. And so having good letters of recommendation, building those relationships early with your professors and others that you work with can be so helpful and is so essential to that process of really presenting yourself for who you are and what you bring to the table. Another thing that Fritz and I have talked about extensively as far as what qualified me for this position is work ethic and the ability to learn and the willingness to learn. So even though I didn't have that much experience going into the internship, they knew that I was going to work as hard as I could to learn whatever I needed to know that I didn't already. And I feel like I've been able to really prove that through these last few months by showing that I can handle these intensive trainings. I can handle jumping into the deep end with teaching classes or visiting with guests in the library. And even though I might not know anything about doing genealogy work in Puerto Rico, that I might be able to learn something about that and then dive in anyways and kind of learn on my feet. And so I would say recognizing those talents that we have that really are talents, but sometimes we don't see them the same way as more tangible skills, can be a really good way to both build your resume and really present yourself for who you are and what you're actually bringing to the table.
Wonderful. And sometimes realizing your talents comes from building that relationship with those faculty members, because they can see that in you. So I think those can go hand in hand too. Thank you for sharing. I think that's all of the questions we have.
Actually, I do see two more.
And there they are.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so Kayla said, could this internship possibly transfer to a real job in the future?
Ooh, so that's always the hope in a situation like this. With family search, it's a little bit tricky, especially in the department that I'm in, just because there's a set number of research specialists for each area. And the only way that one of those opens up generally is if someone leaves. And so the hope is always that something will open up in the right time and in the right way for us to be able to take over and continue forward. As far as my personal internship right now, it doesn't look like there will be any job openings right when I'm finishing, but there's always the hope of something opening later in the future. So it's definitely something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And it's definitely also an opportunity that I would be very qualified for going into it after having this internship like Lindsay was saying, I've really been trained to be one of the research specialists, not just the intern to the specialist. So hopefully an opportunity comes along later on. And if it does, then I'll be ready for it. And I think that's really the hope that Family Search has for all of the interns, is that by the end of it, we could easily jump right in and work alongside our coworkers as a full coworker with them, a full colleague.
Wonderful. We have one more question, it looks like, from Naomi Wentz. And it says, it sounds like this internship is quite a lot of time and commitment, as well as an amazing opportunity. Do you have any tips on how to balance school and an internship?
That's a very poignant question, because this internship is 28 hours a week. So it definitely keeps me running. I think what I've learned is that I have to be willing to divide my time based on what time I have available, and not based on the idealistic give 100% of my time to every different situation that I have. It's okay if I share my screen for the whiteboard for just a minute?
Of course.
All right.
Is there an ability to do that? Okay, there you go.
There we go. So this is something that I used to share as a peer mentor for the freshmen here at BYU. I used to work as a freshman peer mentor. And our time is kind of like this pie chart. This is not going to be a pretty circle, but that's okay. So we have the time that we're sleeping, and time that we spend at school and doing homework and working and socializing, and it's all divided up and adds up to this full circle. And what I've had to learn is that if I want to spend more time on this internship than I would have normally spent on work, maybe we're covering more of the circle now, like maybe this section, then that means that that time has to come from somewhere. For me, that's meant that for school, I needed to take a lighter credit load than I have in the past. I had it drilled into my brain for the longest time that I had to have 15 credit hours, that was just normal. That was what I was supposed to do. But says who? Whose idea was that, you know? It just kind of came out of just an arbitrary number that I had in mind. But full-time student status comes with 12 credit hours, and that's what I'm taking right now, is 12 credit hours instead. And so because of that, I've been able to kind of take that time and section it out a little bit differently, so that school is maybe taking up this much time, and then the pink could represent the time that I'm spending at the internship. What I've really found is important in making sure that the rest of life stays in balance as well. So recognizing that if I'm going to be spending some time working on my church calling, for example, that I need to plan and prepare so that I can take that time out of whatever else I would have been spending my time on. And just thinking of it with this perspective has helped me a lot. I know that it's kind of just saying, well, manage your time by just managing your time. But I guess the point that I'm really trying to get across is just that if there's something that's important to you, then you'll make time for it. It's just recognizing where that time is coming from that makes all the difference. And being able to say, okay, if I want to make sure that I get a full night's sleep tonight, there might be something that has to give. And being able to determine what things are most important. Sometimes that means that I do have to take a couple hours off of my internship and focus on midterms. That's happened a couple of times where school has to take priority. And other times, like during the week of Roots Tech, I needed to focus more on my internship. And so that's what I would say, is just really focusing on how you divide up the time that you have, because if the time is already there, you don't make new time. It's still 24 hours in a day. So the time has to come from somewhere, and just recognizing where it's coming from is really important and really helpful as well.
Can I just jump in here too? I love that pie graph. And I just want to say, learning how to say no is something too, right? I think that a lot of people attending this event, sometimes it's hard to prioritize, well, what are the things that I say no to? And being fluid in what that looks like. So, and that's something that I feel we have learned, especially over COVID too, is how to be adaptable. And so that's what I'm hearing from your answer, kind of what resonated with me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is definitely something that doesn't come naturally to me. And my parents are probably laughing right now because they know that that's true. But being able to learn how to adapt in that way, and like you said, being willing to say no from time to time, and knowing that maybe sometimes it's saying no to one of the online consultations that one of my coworkers is trying to pass off if I just don't have time for that. Or maybe it's being able to say, you know what, I don't have time to do this other event for school or whatever it might be. Being able to balance that all out does need to be fluid. It does need to be something that's constantly changing. And so remember that you're not trapped in a decision once you make it, that you're able to adjust as time goes on.
Learning to be able to balance your time and figure that out is a wonderful thing to learn in an internship and career, and just for skills for the future anyway. So that's just a wonderful thing to learn as well. So I also wanted to say about the question you answered before about getting a job with Family Search after, if that was an option, just for all students who are looking for internships. The wonderful point of internships too is that now you just have a connection with Family Search and with these great mentors there who, even if a job doesn't open, can direct you to other places, write letters of recommendation for you, and help you fill out that resume even more fully. So it's just such a rich experience, regardless if an opportunity opens up after or not. So I love that. We have one more question from Kianui, and they asked, are internships only for students that have graduated? Or are there any classes recommended to be taken before applying for an internship? And I can answer that too.
I was going to say, if you want to jump in, then I can add to what you want to say, because I think that you'd be able to share best, Allison, since you're the one who's over internships.
Yes, well, I will just say then for family history majors, you can take up to 6 credits of internship credits towards your major. And there are the beginning family history classes that they would like you to take. Usually that first class, that 217, is an essential class to take before. But there is no really a big requirement other than just how you feel. And like you said, a few classes that you took that helped you prepare for that as well. So just taking some beginning classes and starting to build that resume, but students can sit with me and I can help them figure out how to get ready to do an internship as well. So anything you'd like to add to that? Sorry to jump into there.
No, I think that was perfect. I would say, just making sure that whatever the internship is, that you're able to go into it feeling qualified enough. And that might not mean being perfectly qualified for the position. You may not be ready to take over a job at the company already, And like I said, I felt very underqualified in a lot of ways. But when I looked at the list of things that they were looking for, I was able to check off enough of those boxes to say, you know what, this would be doable. And so, like Allison said, it would be great to sit down with her and just talk through that process, talk through what preparation you might want to have for the internship, just so that you can have the best experience possible.
And for those of you who are joining us as guests on this call that are not BYU students, we want to also exclaim that in the internship posting, they may say whether or not you need to be a student or not. And so that's something that you can discuss with the hiring committees at these organizations, is whether or not that is a prerequisite. So that's a really good place to look as well. And then having some family history training or research training or language training is also something that looks really great on a resume. So thank you for that question.
Okay, and that's all the questions I have.
Well, thank you everybody so much for coming. We hope this was valuable. It was really valuable to me to see what our students do, the process of decision-making, the process of mentorship, the process of networking, feeling qualified, drawing on personal strength, drawing on you know, Hailey, you are just such a great representative of somebody who's trying things on and acting in faith and listening and pondering and using those God-given beautiful gifts that you have as you're kind of navigating this process. And even though it's a question mark about whether or not this internship will turn into a job, I have no doubt in my mind that you are doing what you need to be doing to be qualified for what's next in your life. And so thank you again so much for coming, and thanks everybody for joining us in our last webinar this semester.